Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Furry Valley podcast. Thank you for joining me and our guest. We hope you are having a great day and enjoy listening to our discussion. Today, I'm joined by Paco, one of our senior community managers who is leading our speaking admin team, to help bring you events like this podcast and the weekly debate we hold every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. How are you doing today, Paco?
I'm all right. It's a pleasure to be here on the classic British nocturnal sleep schedule that we tend to keep to revolve around the eastern seaboard of the United States.
The American, the English American. That's what we are, aren't we? It's for those listening. It's 1 a.m. where Paco and I are, but we're so conditioned to everyone around us being Americans that we pretty much are honorary Americans, minus the politics. So I'm sure the majority of people in Furry Valley will, of course, know who you are. But for those who don't, could you just tell us a little bit about yourselves, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the introduction kind of gave up my role. I help bring speaking events to this community. My passion is helping people build social skills. So whether that be public speaking, in debate, simply giving simply helping them build an idea of how to converse or give a talk on a topic they're really passionate about. I've got a lot of experience doing this. I've ran debating societies both at school and now that I'm at university. For those of you who don't know, I'm a university student studying history in my final year.
What is it that you like about enabling people to develop social skills and so forth? And do you feel that's something you've always had yourself, or?
No, I don't. I think that social skills are something which a lot of people struggle with, and I think they're quite unique in a way that they are. There's no easy guide, right? They're very easy to fail at, but when you make a mistake, no one says this is what you did wrong. This is how you improve. Instead, people are met with rejection and exclusion. And I think that lack of a guide, the fact that there are so many people struggling to improve their social skills, and yet there's very few ways to help yourself improve. That's why I like being there to help provide that service.
Because so you feel like you make a difference.
Yeah. When in a field where there are very few people willing to say, this is exactly what you did wrong and this is how you get better at it.
Yeah. I think it's a very difficult skill to learn and also to teach because each situation is so unique. You know, there's never two social situations which are quite the same. There's always a lot of subtle stuff going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's rarely a sort of an objectively best approach. I know that I still make mistakes. But that was a very firm yeah.
Yeah, we've as a senior community manager, we've had sessions where problems, but they've been solved. You've learned, so we're getting there.
Yeah. And I think generally that's been more about how to handle organizations and people than it has been how to.
All right. So as a non-furry, what was your first experience with furries?
My first experience with them? Well, I had a childhood friend when I used to go on holiday in the south of England, who was a few years older than me and was a part of this fandom here. And so I was introduced to it at quite a young age. And at that time, it was strange, it was weird. His younger brothers went, oh God, why does he do this? But it became apparent that apart from that quite superficial difference, I was more similar to him than I was to some of the other friends down there who were, might want to, go swimming or climbing instead of, discuss things.
Mm-hmm.
So it became clear to me very young that even though this wasn't something which I felt was particularly for me, I could still feel, familiarity with the people who belonged to it.
Yeah, and a sense of association, I guess, even though there were differences as well.
Yes. And I think that it's not, it's a very, even though it's something which someone might or might not be, it doesn't really form the entirety of who you are. There are far more far more important characteristics for getting along with someone than how they choose to identify themselves as. It's this idea that there are more important differences than sort of
whether or not you're a furry.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Paco, many people here in Furry Valley tease that you're going to become a furry. Indeed, in the past, we've seen your Discord avatar being modified to include cat ears and so forth. Do you think it'll happen?
No, I don't.
Why not?
And simply the length of time that I've been exposed and not felt kind of that pressure to become is I don't think it's going to happen. And I think as is quite clear now, by the way we're having this podcast, it's almost become a part of my identity that I am a Hmong, but not, part of it. It is part of my identity that I am the non-fur here. So, I don't think that I feel any kind of pressure to become.
You think the length of time sort of implies that it's unlikely at this point you would become a furry if you hadn't already done so, I see.
Yes.
Yeah. So the perception is, at least, that the majority of furries come across and integrate into the furry fandom because of a lack of acceptance or presence elsewhere. You clearly have a bright future, excellent skills, talents, real-life friends, and so forth. So how did you come to be here?
So two answers. How did I come to exist within and on the outskirts of the furry community more generally?
Yeah.
And how I came to be a part of this one particularly. So I'll answer the first one. As I mentioned earlier, I had a friend who was very well ingrained within this community, and whilst he was on holiday, he had very, very poor internet. So he used to come round to where I was staying and access a load of websites particular to this community from my place. So on a very basic level, I became quite familiar with the trappings and environments of this community at a very early age. And so, that bred a certain knowledge and awareness that might not usually be there as someone who isn't a part of it. But then I existed within these as part of kind of human enclaves within these broader, larger communities, rather than really integrating. But I had friends who did bridge that gap and were furries. I just never really integrated. But then by chance, I had a friend who I'm sure some of you will know, who was playing RuneScape with the FV clan. And then by chance, he invited me in here to play a game of League of Legends with Simba and himself one day. And that's how I stumbled across this place. I kept making myself useful, initially in the Fortnite section, and then with the establishment of the debate team. Made some good friends, generally some names that stick out are, of course, yourself, Simba, but also people like Arze, etc., who, it became more than just an organizational thing or a curiosity or a place to play games. It was, the place on the internet where I chose to call home. And as such, I stuck to this place particularly.
Yeah, that's quite inspirational that as a non-furry you feel enough of a connection to what we have here to warrant yourself to say those things. That's the sort of thing I hope when we get furries here they make us our home. But for a non-furry to do that is really quite something out of the box.
Well, think about what this community offers. It really does offer, a place particularly for those who are a bit sort of socially isolated or introverted, where they can feel safe at home, find people, etc. And I think that's something which lots of people beyond the furry fandom could use. If only I wish that our remit was broader, because we could. This is something that one day I hope we could bring to many more people than the burgeoning 4,000.
Yeah, about 4,000 on Discord. Probably about getting towards 20,000 across all our platforms, all our servers. But yeah, it's I suppose it comes down to sort of being a person first and a furry second, and of course all people need some sort of place which they feel they fit in and can grow and be nurtured, and it's nice to it's obviously nice to provide this place for furries, but Yeah, of course, non-furs who are listening to this, you are welcome here too. I think we have probably between about 5 and 6% of our members are non-furries. It may be slightly lower than that, but it's that kind of level.
And it's definitely worth talking about the kind of the level of involvement and identification with the group. So
Yeah.
some people are more sort of, I would say, firmly furry than others. It's a greater part of their identity. So there are those who are here, may have an avatar which is furry, has cat ears, whatever. But beyond this frame of mind, it kind of doesn't see it as a core part of their identity, and that's characteristic of humans. Choose their identities, right? They pick and choose relative to the situations they're in.
Yeah.
They feel some more strongly than others. Multiple identities overlapping, interlocking.
Yeah, and
dependent on
changing
one
over
another.
time as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and it sounds like yours is kind of similar, but my personal definition of being a furry is simply having a fursona. But many would say that abstractly, being a member of the furry community would make you a furry. It's not entirely clear how to define the furry community, but it seems fairly clear that you are part of it given your presence here. You identify quite clearly as a non-fur. So what are your thoughts on this? How would you define a furry precisely?
That's a very interesting question. So I would perhaps bring up a comparison there between, let me elucidate this with the difference between two concepts in political theory, to be a bit posh. The difference between a nation and a state. A state is the institutions, the trappings, the things that make up the apparatus of something. So the police, the courts, the government, etc.
Yes.
And those are kind of the parts of the furry community which people can belong to. And you can exist within the British state and not feel British. But the British nation, which you choose to identify with, British identity, a sense of feeling British as opposed to feeling French, patriotism and belief in certain ideas of what it means to feel British, that sense of identity, that is distinct from the state. That is identity as opposed to belonging within the institutions that make it up. And that's what I say I am. I live within the state. I help build the apparatus of the state.
Yes.
And I identify with the nation's mission, but I understand that I am, to a degree, partly separate from it.
Interesting. So you don't think that being a furry is something you can really precisely define, but more it's an individual identification of.
Correct.
Do I choose to be called or identify as
Yes.
a furry rather than can I be precisely defined as a furry or not a furry?
Exactly. I think someone who is a furry is someone who says, I am a furry.
Okay.
And yes, there are some quite common characteristics that these people therefore flag up. What they call in identity formation kind of like common myths, symbols, beliefs. But they're not common to everyone, right? There are definitely some people who are furries who don't have a fursona, who would identify as furries, perhaps self-identify, but don't have one. And that's because identity doesn't, and how we choose to identify ourselves is hard to fit with objective criteria forced upon us. So there is a clash there, I think.
That's really, really interesting.
I would. Sorry, just one thing. I would recommend to anyone listening to this, kind of who's interested in identity formation, how humans create ideas of themselves. Imagined Communities, a book by Benedict Anderson, which is understood as kind of like the beginning of political theory on identity formation in kind of like the modern age from the 80s. Really good book.
Yeah, we can link that in our video description.
Will do. Yeah.
I've been a furry for over 15 years now, and when I began, the public presence we had was limited to niche and quite defamatory pieces, for example in Vanity Fair, the infamous CSI episode, and so forth. Do you feel that because furries are more mainstream nowadays, our public perception is just improving naturally, or do you think there's more to it than that?
So I think it's a few things. So it's easier for. Let's first look at how they are portrayed by externals. So it's easier to mock something that doesn't have a voice to talk back. When the community was very small and very, strangely niche, as you put it. It wasn't very easy to push back against a media outlet's kind of presentation. I think the larger the community has grown, that it's now easier for groups to, have, if, for example, at cons they will have a dedicated press team, they'll have very clear rules on who is allowed to film and how the media can interact. So kind of familiarity has bred a certain way of dealing with media criticism. But I think there is more to it than that. I think that perhaps an awareness of being watched has bred better behavior. I'm unsure though about that one. Actually, I don't know the ins and outs.
I think experience is a valuable teacher. Obviously, I have, as you know, having been a furry for many years, I've seen all sorts of, oh dear, look at what the media have published about furries. And my policy at this point is simply don't give any interviews to the media. We had, when Tumblr banned NSFW content, the BBC tried to interview me as a furry community owner to give my thoughts on this. And I think the safest thing perhaps to do is to say nothing and refuse the sorts of interviews. Because I think there's a danger that the press will spin a story, and it's always the way that the media will do whatever is required to best sell their stories. And people like bad news, people like controversial things, which is why we don't hear about too many good things in the news. So I think being conscious from experience and learning from what's happened in the past is valuable, and perhaps that stops us putting our foot in it, so to speak, or even not doing so, but being twisted as if we had done so.
Yes, I think a lot of it comes down to the prejudices of the interviewer going in.
Yeah.
Very easy to edit a particularly non-live interview so it shows the gotcha moment.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And you can look at that even by the way that YouTube videos appear within hours of live interviews, which combine those clearest defeats into one sort of package.
Yes,
think about the way Diane Abbott gets presented in this country.
Yes. It's interesting. Go on.
On press and spin is that the BBC aren't going to, say, oh, this one guy's turned down our interview, let's call it a day. They're going to go and get someone else.
They are. But I should hope at least that the furry fandom as a whole has learnt from the experience of those who came before us 15 years ago to not openly speak to the media and to certainly hold our tongues on some things. If they ask, what does if mean? Don't tell them, if they want to interview you on something which might be presented poorly, then it's probably best not to talk to them. Or at least be very carefully, as you mentioned, the press teams at cons, carefully curate exactly who's going to be talking, the topics you're going to be talking about. And
that's because you can sure as hell say that the media is going to very carefully curate their version of the side of things. So you might as well play the game right back.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you've obviously seen during your time here as an SCM a number of disgusting people within the fandom more widely targeting Furry Valley. Having been a furry for so long myself, I've seen it all before. I'm completely desensitized to their attacks, but they are genuinely horrific. Some of our less hardened furs are really affected and frightened by these troublemakers, fearing that they will be attacked next. As a non-fur who probably hasn't seen this sort of thing outside the fandom, and indeed as a person generally, what advice can you offer to our members who do feel scared, especially to those who actively want to stand up for us but don't want to be harassed or attacked themselves?
So, there was at first a certain disconnect between what you'd expect in, these fluffy profile pictures spewing nonsense and hatred. But let me answer this more as a historian than I would as a fur, non-fur, whatever. If you do not stand when lies and hatred are being spread about someone else, which are lies and slander, then they will come for you next. You have to make a stand somewhere. And you should make that stand for the truth, what you know to be true. So what I say to those who are afraid and don't want to be targeted is that really in this world there are some people, furries and not furries, who are bullies. Just bullies who will lie to advance their agenda, and the way to stop them is to just tell the truth, stand up, and even if it means that you get some criticism back, know that the silent majority, those who are also like you and afraid, will be inspired and rally behind you. Um, the greatest grouping in any kind of online conflict are the spectators. And I can assure you that even if it looks like the entire world is sort of screaming, most are actually totally silent. And if you are willing to be the voice of reason, standing up against those few extroverted people who will yell and yell and yell without any evidence, they will support you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think an important point to raise as well, not just relating to this, but generally, is if you all are quiet, then they're only going to be targeting one or two people. But if everyone stands up and everyone tells the truth and says what they believe in and doesn't let these people simply run their mouths or whatever slander they want, then there will be too many people talking for them to attack each of you. So you'll be able to get your points across and you won't be shouted down or harassed or attacked because it's not practical for the people to do so.
And as someone who has ran debate society after debate society, I've seen enough raging speeches. I've seen enough sort of angry, vehement speeches with little on evidence and heavy on accusations, and they don't convince anyone. When you take the vote at the end, which shows how the vote has swung and what people believe, they've not actually convinced anyone. So even though they look loud and they look scary, they're actually ineffective and childish. So you really have nothing to fear from these people.
Indeed, and I think it's important to not be too afraid. These people are, at the end of the day, just furries on the internet. If they are a little crazy and they attack you and such, the block button is there for a good reason. But do remember that if you believe in a community, if you believe in the people who run that community, and those people are being attacked and the community is being attacked, then eventually, if you don't do anything to help, the people will get tired of being attacked and they won't want to put in as much time to give you something which you clearly enjoy. So do try to be unafraid. And those of you, there are thousands of you here, and I know all of you know what we're like. All of you support us, which is wonderful. We're super grateful for that. But do have a voice. Don't be afraid, because they can't beat all of you.
I'd also say this message applies far more broadly than to this community. That idea
Absolutely,
of standing up for yourself, standing up for your friends, standing up for what you believe in, and looking at that, going back to the main topic of this podcast, which is how non-furries such as myself view furries. There's nothing quite as powerful as someone who is willing to say, this is what I am and this is what I believe in.
Yep.
That staunch stance of being willing to say, from your perspective of, I am a furry, is incredibly powerful in the same way as someone coming out as gay or coming out as, whatever they're saying they are. It is a powerful stand.
Yes.
Yeah, so don't be afraid to, be who you are and stand up for what you believe in. Please take that away with you into your lives more broadly.
You're being brave, not foolish. So thank you, Paco. I really appreciate the insightful responses to everything we've spoken about so far. We're going to turn now to our lovely live audience and answer some of the questions that they have left for us. So first we have a question from DGB who asks, as someone that is part of many fandoms myself, I would like to know exactly how you tend to interact with people whenever you enter into a fandom. Do you treat them any differently than you would someone in your normal everyday life, or is it a skewed perspective to appeal to those around you?
So I'd say two things there. I'd say that it's not so much about entering a fandom as entering any particular social group. It's a very human thing that all humans do to sort of edit themselves a little bit to appeal to the people around them, whether that be softening their voice or staying quiet for a bit whilst they acclimatize. Personally, I don't think I'm much to change myself kind of online versus in person. I think I am relatively similar. And I definitely don't change how I am based on which fandom particularly I'm entering. Um, but I think more generally kind of that human trait of changing little parts of yourself so that you just fit in a bit more. I think I do that. I think everyone does that.
Yeah, so sort of university versus online. Obviously, you behave differently. You wouldn't, talk about furry stuff to a professor.
Yeah,
well,
yeah. Well,
well, kind
maybe
of are
one.
right now, but
I have already.
yeah. Next, we have Phoenix from Telegram. He asks, "What do you think the fandom could do to actively better itself in the public eye?"
That's a very good question. I think generally exposure. I think charitable acts and goodwill. So doing good deeds, but then also the effective advertising operation around it. So, for example, this community, we do so much stuff, but if no one was out there advertising and recruiting, no one would ever know about it.
Yeah.
You can do as much good in the world as you want, and there's a certain, I think, valor almost in being quietly charitable. But if you want to improve reputation, then you must publicize. You must get it out there what you are doing.
Yeah.
Because then people will take stock and say, "Hey, these people really can't be so bad. Look at all this good they're doing."
Yeah. We have next another question from DGB. He says, as someone who talks to you regularly, he'd like to know if you're involved in any other fandom.
No, not really.
Okay.
I suppose around some movies and etc. I'm a big fan of sort of Game of Thrones and certain video game series, but not actively involved in the sort of community sense that I am here.
Who's your favorite Game of Thrones character?
Don't. It's been too long, and I'm too sad about the way that the direction the show has been going. It makes me sad.
You're looking forward to the final series, though, or not?
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully, it will provide some sense of closure.
Yeah, not more questions than it's given answers.
Absolutely.
Next, we have a question from Kenshi, who asks, if you were a furry or had a fursona, what species would you be and why?
Oh god, this is a pit I'm going to.
So what are we going to convert you into? We're basically asking you.
So let's go on a bit of a poncy detour into the works of a writer called Angela Carter. Angela Carter writes a lot about anthropomorphization and the line between man and beast. So she has two particularly interesting characters. One is a wolf in the story, The Company of Wolves, which it's about talking about how humans are really the beasts. That's kind of the idea of it. That they're the ones who live these cold, cruel lives. Think of the way that animals are. A wolf can be neither cruel or cunning. It simply is.
It's a wolf, indeed.
Yes. But humans project these traits onto animals as kind of mirrors of their own self.
Yes.
And I think that's a very interesting kind of story. So the characters in those are kind of as close as I've come to sort of looking at that sort of thing. Another one is a character called The Courtship of Mr. Lion. So those kind of species and interests, so those kind of angles. But there's been no thought into it otherwise. Although there has been some suggestion that this propeller hat is hiding ears, so who knows?
So if I push you, choose an animal, what would you choose?
We'll come back to this at the end. Let me think.
All right. I'll give you half an hour to stew.
Yeah.
DGB asks, if there was one thing that you could say to us in the fandom as an outsider, what things do you think we could change, and what good things appeal to you most about our group or our fandom?
I think it's hard to talk about the group in general. I think that there are a lot of distinctions, a lot of internal distinctions, and I'm not sure how much my quite positive experience here is representative of the group as a whole.
Indeed.
Anything I say to change, it would be sometimes. It's more a matter of social skills. It is. Sometimes someone will say something really off color or off topic. That's less to do with the group as a whole as it is an individual who is not very good in those situations. And that comes on to actually what I really like about this place, that it provides that quite comfortable home and chance to improve and be valued for people who might otherwise struggle externally. And in doing so, it gives them a place where they can develop themselves to the point where they do not struggle externally. So indeed, the flaws of having these people with poor social skills who might fuck up and say something really stupid is indeed also its strength, that it provides a home for these people who need it.
That's interesting. I suppose in such a vast fandom, you've got it's difficult to sort of say something general because they're so, as you say, it's so even identifying as a furry is difficult. How you define that? So
I would say definitely the thing that is the most often cited outside of criticism is sexualization and the extent to which the fandom revolves around kind of sexual activity. Again, I'd say that this community really is not representative of that at all. But I wonder if perhaps the formats in which the community engages could be done in a way that more clearly separates NSFW content from safe for work areas.
Yeah.
And in doing so, provides kind of a public front, and then kind of, the seedy dark end, which all communities have, and, but have it less as the presented face.
I suppose it's almost a generalization of the internet itself, that you'll get kids who go on these sites which they hear from their friends, usually at school, and I don't know, perhaps that's not really something we can fix as a fandom, but it's simply representative of wider society. It's just we are stereotyped with that sort of thing. It's difficult to shake that when
I think it's also partly about the way that that groups who are marginalized grow up. So a historical example, the gay community in England in the 60s and 70s acquired a reputation as being quite, dirty and subversive and grungy, but it did so out of necessity. The fact was that since it was outright illegal, it had to grow up in the dirty part of town where the police wouldn't come knocking, and had to exist in these quite backroom areas. And so it was quite natural that the kind of the lawlessness and kind of seediness that it had was actually a product of the exclusion that the rest of society forced upon it. And then it has kind of had that been burdened with that reputation, although somewhat lessened, ever since. And I think the same is true. The fact that this community has grown up in a way that is in many ways excluded and stereotyped has led to a reputation which has partly shaped it and is now quite difficult to shake.
Yeah. Cry asks, what's your opinion on fursuits?
I don't have a very strong opinion on them, really. I think that, if people wish to wear them, I think that it's kind of almost an extension of the persona, a way to either represent who you want to be or to be someone else entirely. I don't think that they're harmful in any way. So sure, if people want to do that, what's the harm? What's the loss?
As long as it's not hurting anyone, I suppose that's the main thing, isn't it?
Exactly. If it makes the individual doing it feels better and it has no negative consequences, who cares?
Yeah, indeed.
The Better People's Festival on this would be, what was it, episode 3, where they actually knew what they were talking about?
Yeah, exactly. I think we have a lot of fursuiters in the community, though. It's something that we have our FurCon attendee chat and the FurCon attendee role. If any of you are curious, you can take that role in the Welcome and Roles chat. Next question we have is again by DGB. DGB asks, would you entertain the idea of participating in fandom-based activities such as conventions or meets? Were you given the opportunity to? And if so, would it be just to meet the people that you know, or would you be curious about finding out more about furry and so forth?
So I think both. For example, Simba and I have already met. We met a while back along with Simba's partner. So I have met with members of the community already, people who I consider my friends. Going to kind of the broader, sort of meets based around the fandom, such as conventions or meets. Well, DGB, you and I discussed this actually, didn't we? Would you come to a convention to hang out? And I think the answer is yes, I would, and I would do so both to meet my friends and out of a sort of curiosity for what it would be like. I don't think I would engage with it from the view of someone who is, genuinely kind of wow, this is amazing. Look at all these people like me. It would instead be these are my friends, these are what they're interested in. Let's check it out. It would at once be a very convenient way to meet people who I have established quite close friendships with over a long range of time, over a long period of time, and to see the sort of things that they enjoy doing. There might also, just an addition, be kind of a line. So, whilst I think I would be very comfortable with going along to a convention and being, myself a non-fur there, I think I'd feel less comfortable kind of, wearing a fursuit or, I don't know, things which are kind of more clear signs of being, because they are not who I am.
Yeah, I suppose it's one of those things where even the variety in conventions is huge. So I'm sure the experiences DGB mentioned last week between a small local convention and a massive thing like MFF in itself is almost like a whole different world to one another. So there's, I suppose, a lot to learn.
One thing that I'd be very happy to do would be to go to a convention with the intention of organising an FV kind of event. If for example, what is it, Confuzzled in Birmingham, if we had a large enough group of us there, I'd be very happy to go along and aid with the organisation, whatever. So that'd be so cool. See that kind of IRL.
I think it's quite likely. Confuzzled, what is it, May time? Yeah. I imagine we probably have 30 to 50 people probably will go from Furry Valley. Quite a lot.
It
would be good to get something organised.
Although May time might mean
yeah. So Excalibur asks, economically, furries provide many benefits for businesses, especially in locations like hotels, bowling alleys, and arcades. But a lot of people don't see those benefits and choose to look at us negatively. How can we better point out the positives in what we do?
Well, as I said earlier, it's the effectiveness of the advertising operation around the things that you do.
So you think it's just sort of expressing more publicly that we do these good things, and obviously we've got reputation which is hard to shake, but
getting your side of the story out there and getting it out there in formats and ways where it isn't doctored. So, as you said, engaging with media outlets who are going to edit your story to a point where it shows what they want to say is unacceptable.
But
if we had some kind of press outlet or way of speaking around, some kind of Facebook page with 1 million likes, then we would have our own loudspeaker rather than needing to move through sort of filters of sorts, lenses.
DGB asks, do you want to go?
Yeah, but on a more localized level, kind of stopping the broad view and rather than the change in your community. I think just being proud of who you are personally, just saying whenever someone puts forward a view contra, saying, actually, I am, first of all, this, and I do X, Y, Z. I am not engaged in these stereotypes that you have put forward. If you ever want to talk about it more, get in touch. That's an incredibly powerful statement in itself. Yeah, go on.
So DGB asks, as a joke question, how do you feel about the whole ooh oh oh thing?
It's fucking stupid, but whatever.
I suppose it comes back to your view on fursuits as not hurting other people then.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes I'm like, oh dear, what do I call this person? Their name is ooh X3, whatever.
Oh, when you're private messaging or welcoming.
Hi,
ooh.
Nice to meet you. Master of oohs. Okay, what are we going for here then? But so it's one of those things again, which I'm just sort of question mark. Don't really understand, but whatever. It's harmless.
Yeah. Next question. Let me scroll down a little. We have a good question from Caden. Caden asks, Have you learned anything interesting or valuable from this community that you likely would not have otherwise had you not engaged with them? And if so, what?
Yes, absolutely, an incredible amount. So two things here. I'm going to sort of more broad engagement with the community and the sites and kind of formats on which it exists, and then this community specifically. Firstly, more broadly, I am, as I expect many of the people in this chat room are, an internet child. I grew up spending huge amounts of time on the internet, on websites which are forms used by this community on a daily basis, and in many ways they taught me a lot of my social skills. I grew up writing on them, talking on them, engaging in them, not as a furry, but on its peripheries, on its outskirts, and that was incredibly valuable to me, both in the fact that it provided me with friends and mentors, as well as just experience talking, kind of that sounding board for my ideas. I think I developed myself in a number of ways through that kind of engagement over the years on those websites.
Mm-hmm.
But then this community specifically, the list is ridiculously long. I can't talk as much about the way that I just made myself useful, and before I knew it, I was gaining genuine organizational and managerial experience.
Yeah.
I've become better at managing my time. I can organize people. I can, generally how to read situations, how to deal with an unhappy customer. All these skills.
All these skills as well, which you can obviously apply to real life jobs and so forth.
Exactly. Exactly. For example, I run a university debating society, and its command structure is in many ways modeled on this place. It and that kind of holding people to account, promoting talent, valuing experience less and potential more.
Yeah.
So much. So yeah.
That is one of the things we really, really champion here is the whole idea of if you've got potential and if you're inspired and you're proactive, we'll give you a go. If you want some sort of responsibility or such, if you want to put yourself forwards for things, we're always looking for those sorts of people who haven't necessarily done it before but are eager. If you've got that, go and get it. Then that's something we're always very happy to promote. And I think that goes against a lot of real life businesses where they're like, well, they'll almost not hire you unless you've done that exact job before. It's really sad. I think a lot of people fall by because they could do it perfectly well if they were given a bit of training, given a bit of support, given a bit of inspiration, but they lose out because so experience focused.
Absolutely. Let me tell you, as someone who's worked with a number of organizations now, I've looked at professional corporations and large charities and thought, my goodness, there is a furry Discord server that is better run than you are. You'll find that the kind of experience in the real world will actually teach you that there is a surprisingly large amount of incompetence out there and room for improvement. And the willingness to just stand up and say this isn't, effective management practice is so powerful. And the willingness to kind of start putting things right. You'll step on toes and make some people angry, but if the right people are in the right places, they'll recognize you
and they'll make it happen, which is what we do here. We have a lot of openness to that sort of thing, where if you think you can improve something, we give out feedback forms, all sorts of stuff, messages anytime, let us know what we can do. And as Paco says, he's learnt many skills from what he's been doing here. A lot of the things he's been able to do here are opportunities that you can all take. For example, if you want to apply to be one of our section admins, that's something which we're always open to. Please do approach us. If you want to be a speaker at one of the debates, if you want to be a guest on the podcast, if you want to get these valuable real life experiences and improve yourself in ways that can improve your real life really tangibly, don't be afraid. Do ask us and make it happen. We'll work with you if you're willing to work with us.
I had to email my supervisor at university, who was worried about me having not handed in some work. and he wanted a very kind of clear presentation of the things that I was planning to do over the next few weeks. And just being able to condense a huge amount of information into a very, easily readable format in the way that I would have to on Discord when I'm giving out messages to admins or sending things in a way that was readable and clear. That's just something which I'd figured out and sort of refined here. All sorts of basic, useful life skills like communication, organization. You'll learn them here. You'll learn them here by participating and involving yourself and just getting stuck in.
Yeah, absolutely. DGB asks, has your worldview changed since you've entered the fandom on certain topics? Because he thinks that as a non-fur, your lifestyle is probably widely different to the mindset that we have as furries.
Not particularly. My
Okay.
worldview was quite similar coming into how it is now.
Okay.
Yeah. If I had to say anything that has changed, simply that kind of, organization management stuff more than it is kind of how I view people. I think it was rather my worldview towards identity, etc., which made me so conducive to being a part of here in the first place.
Yeah. Uriel asks, what do you have to say for young furries that have parents that don't support them?
This is a tough question. And it's a tough question because as a child you are in many ways reliant on your parents. And so if you kick up a fuss to the extent that they are going to hurt you or wrong you, you want to be very careful. What I'd say is, A, don't be afraid to access external services. If your parents are not supportive of your decision to the point that they are violent or cruel, the best option is 99% of the time to go to the authorities. I'm not a trained expert. I don't want to wade in on these discussions where it's not viable, but I say be true to yourself and don't be afraid to get in external support as and when you need it. Seek out proper expert advice and use it. And that applies to a lot of situations.
Yeah. And importantly, don't give up on being yourself. Don't ever change for people because you're not going to be under your parents' roof forever. You will eventually have your own life. And if you can build up that resilience and self-love that regardless of those around you, you will always accept yourself, that will benefit you for the rest of your life. And that's an important lesson to take.
Absolutely.
Caden asks again, what is your take on art and suit commissioners? Are they overcharging from your outside view, or is it a reasonable sort of price to pay for this is for things like furry arts, fursuits, and so on? Do you know the prices of these things?
No, and that might give you an idea of kind of how how I engage with this community. So, I'm very involved here in this group, but I'm totally unaware.
Yeah.
Well, almost totally unaware. I'm quite aware of kind of writing, etc., but very, very much less aware of art and suits.
Okay. So if I told you that from a sort of quality artist, you might get a headshot for $30 to $50, and you might get a full piece with a background for $150 to $200, and a fursuit will cost you anything between about $2,000 and $6,000 or $7,000, depending on quality and the creator. What would you think of those prices?
I'd say I wouldn't pay. The truth of economics is that prices are set by what people are willing to pay.
Yep.
And therefore, It's not that they're overpriced. That's the price point at which people are willing to buy these people's wares.
Yeah.
So the way to make prices go down is to not buy these things.
Yes.
As with so many other parts of life, vote with your wallet.
Yeah, I think I would say that's generally true. Obviously, free market supply and demand are important things, but if you look at most furry artists and a good number of fursuit makers, they don't actually have any business skills at all, and they'll spend 6 hours on a piece and charge $15 for it, and they don't seem to realize that there's a disconnect, not only in terms of sort of their hourly rate, but also their pricing strategy just doesn't seem to exist. It's just like, yeah, I'll sell that for that and this for this. And do you think that's something that we should try to address as a fandom? Sort of like give some sort of basic structure, and how can we do that, if so, to try to help the vendors who don't really know any better properly structure themselves as a business?
Absolutely. That's a really interesting idea. So the idea don't really know how to do business, they just know how to make art.
Yeah.
And how you could provide a format which perhaps takes the business part out of it and make sure that they both charge or get paid a fair rate.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, and I think art is a field where it has been historically and still currently difficult to set standard rates, right?
Yeah.
Art is so subjective in that sense. But what formats could we provide? Well, if we here were to start doing, well, as we do, have art and business deals with artists, we can suggest rates, we can put forward maybe a pricing guide, but how to sort of roll it out more generally, I really don't know. Because really,
it's more of I guess the service that we will be looking to provide is sort of taking the business side away from the artist and saying, you're an artist, you love doing art, you're brilliant at art, go and do art. We'll take care of the management side of clients and business and pricing and so forth. That's sort of your view of the best way to do it, I guess.
Yes, so in many ways acting as their kind of agent.
Yes, yeah.
And then taking a cut.
Yeah. Interesting. This is something I've thought about as a service we can provide. It'll be interesting to see where we can go with this. Yeah. Gaming God of War asks, is anyone in your personal life aware of your relation to the furry fandom?
Yes, and they're asleep behind me right now.
I hope we don't wake them up. Uriel asks, what do you think is the best way to explain to someone what a furry is?
That's a good question. I would perhaps sort of explain it as I did before. It's something which someone chooses to identify with, and as such, simply by saying it, they are. And then I'd say, but there are a number of quite common attributes. So going to conventions, fursuiting, being on certain websites and services. Yeah, I'd say that what makes one is identifying with it, but then there are kind of some common attributes which are kind of, ways to spot it.
I'm curious, what percentage of furries do you think have worn a fursuit?
I reckon it's quite low. I reckon it's really low. I think it's more like kind of public facing because it's IRL. It's so kind of obvious and big, Historically, they were used at sort of theme parks, etc., as kind of a standout attraction. And it's very much the case that they are loud and they occupy space. So I think perhaps they are not as representative as we may think, but they are kind of almost like a banner.
Yeah, they're like the colour, the rest sort of fades when you see a fursuit, or even if there's only one fursuiter out of 10 furries. Yeah, it's certainly amplified. Interesting. Excalibur asks, who would you direct people to if you wanted people to see better representation of the furry fandom?
This place, absolutely.
This place. That's
quite a simple answer, but yeah, this place.
Yeah. Nice to hear. I'm going to say now, could we just have a couple more questions from the audience and then we'll finish up because we're going to be coming up to an hour. So one more question. I've got V-Drifts if one more person wants to ask a question after that, and then we will stop. So V-Drift asks, how do you think the fandom should behave when wanting to get rid of someone who badly represents the furry fandom? Or attacks the fandom without researching it first?
Leaf pulling me back to it. So I think it's very hard for fandom as a whole kick someone out, right? Out of this community per se, we can't kick them out of the fandom as a whole. So I think the best part is kind of to publicly say this person does not represent me. If I if I say this person doesn't represent the LGBT community, that doesn't stop them being gay. It is still who they are. So rather, I would say, shy away from group identities and simply say this person doesn't speak for me.
Yeah, be your own person.
Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
Because generally, I'm not a huge fan of kind of collecting yourself as part of a broader whole. We are, and then saying this is we all have one idea. No, you are your own person, and even within any broader group of characteristics, you will have personal opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah. For people who attack the fandom without researching first, well, the obvious answer is to give them some research and tell them you're wrong.
Yeah.
Present people with objective information, and whilst if they've not gone to the effort to research, they're probably not going to give you a good response. People watching will. Spectators of every conflict will see that you're reasonable and they're not.
Juan Carlos asks, the furry community is very creative. You can make your persona in many ways. So what do you think of the people who use other people's pictures, or they steal art and claim it's theirs, that sort of thing?
There's a distinction there, isn't there, between claiming someone's work as your own, simply displaying it.
Yeah.
I would say if an artist has clearly stated, please do not, kind of copyright. Whereas if it's free for public use, then fine.
Yeah.
And then kind of general copyright claims come into play. If the artist claims, get rid of that, then you get rid of it. And those who don't should they're stealing property.
Yeah. It's like anything else, I suppose, in that sense.
Yes.
So
I think that's more of a legal than a moral matter.
Indeed, yeah. So Cry asks, there seem to be a generally big percentage of furries in good financial situations. You see a lot of people paying hundreds or thousands of dollars for commissions, fursuits, and so forth. People who can afford these prices. Why do you think that is?
I think, firstly, a point from human psychology and modern culture, well, not just modern culture, but culture more generally, we tend to pay attention to people with lots of money more. Think about the way that there is a cult around celebrity and wealth. The way that a show like Cribs, for example, celebrates people with huge houses. We don't see tours of one room bedsits.
Yes.
So we generally tend to gravitate our attention to those with more kind of resources. Beyond that, I think there is a large number of areas, perhaps not in the super wealthy range, but in the quite wealthy range of people who might have a pretty good tech job or some kind of backroom specialized thing which they do. Because generally, people doing this might be, quite good at STEM or generally pretty rich from a specialized subject which they're good at. So I think that perhaps this community has quite a lot of that type of person in it. But I'm not sure the extent to which they are there are more of them, or the extent to which they are more visible.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't agree with this. There was some research done, I think, on Anthrocon attendees a few years back. I can't remember the exact year, maybe 2016. And it plotted demographics of things like how much household income they have, gender, sexuality, and so forth. And it turned out that the furry household income pretty much mirrored the general society household income. So there wasn't a great differential. And one thing I'd also like to point out is, yes, a lot of these people pay a lot of money for these things, but the reason why we have this whole, oh crap, I spent my rent money on art thing is because people do that. And so it's not necessarily that they can afford it. I think a lot of people who can't afford it sort of wish they, and that's the same in wider society. You buy a car that you can't quite afford the repayments on, but you want that car. Of course, it's all, people think, oh, it's more cringy if it's some furry art, but it's the same underlying thing.
Status.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, indeed, Cryer mentions that it might come down to the fact that the people who do this are the most visible. And of course, the artists and the fursuit makers who charge these prices are, of course, the most prolific, and hence the people who buy that work are displayed to the greatest audience. So that sort of also backs that point up. So thank you to our wonderful guest Paco, and thank you to our live audience, as well as everyone else who has either asked a question or is listening to this episode of the Furry Valley podcast on YouTube. For anyone who hasn't already done so, please subscribe to us on YouTube and like the videos on our channel. Thank you all.